Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving deep into the story of a figure many of us think we know, but whose story is so much richer and more complex than a single nickname might suggest. We're talking about Thomas, one of the 12 apostles of Jesus. When you hear the name Thomas, what's the first thing that comes to mind? For most people, it's Doubting Thomas. It's a label that has stuck for 2,000 years, painting a picture of a man who lacked faith. But is that the whole story? Was he just a skeptic, or was there something more to him? Let's find out. Thomas, whose name in Aramaic, Tama, means twin, was also known by his Greek name, Dida, which also means twin. The Bible doesn't tell us who his twin was, which is a little mystery in itself. He was called by Jesus to be one of the 12, a select group who would walk with him, learn from him, and eventually carry his message to the world. The Gospel of Matthew lists him right there with the others. Matthew, James, Peter, Andrew, and Thomas. This wasn't a casual decision. To be chosen as an apostle meant leaving everything behind. Your family, your entire way of life to embark on a journey with an uncertain destination. Thomas made that choice. He committed. For 3 years, Thomas was an eyewitness to history. He walked the dusty roads of Galilee with Jesus. He sat at his feet, listening to parables that turned conventional wisdom on its head. He saw incredible things, water turned into wine, blind men given sight, and storms calmed with a single command. He was part of the inner circle, present for moments of profound teaching and breathtaking miracles. Through all this, Thomas's belief in Jesus as the Messiah was being built, piece by piece, experience by experience. But Thomas was also a thinker. He seems to be the kind of person who needed to process things to really understand them. This isn't a flaw, it's a personality trait. And we see this trait surface in a powerful way long before the famous doubting incident. In the Gospel of John, chapter 11, we find a story that reveals the true character of Thomas. Jesus receives news that his dear friend, Lazarus, is gravely ill in Bethany. The disciples are nervous. They remind Jesus, "Rabbi, a short while ago, the Jews there tried to stone you, and yet you are going back." It was a legitimate fear. Going back to Judea was walking right into a danger zone. The tension was high, and the disciples were trying to protect their teacher. But Jesus is resolved. He tells them Lazarus has fallen asleep, and he is going to wake him up. The disciples are confused, but then Jesus says it plainly. Lazarus is dead. And then, in that moment of fear and uncertainty, when everyone else is hesitating, one voice cuts through the silence. It's Thomas. He turns to the other disciples and says something truly remarkable. "Let us also go, that we may die with him." Think about that. This is not the statement of a doubter. This is not the voice of a man weak in faith. This is the declaration of a man filled with fierce loyalty and incredible courage. Thomas understood the risks. He knew that returning to Bethany could mean death for all of them. Yet, his response wasn't, "Let's not go," or "Is this a good idea?" It was, "If our master is going to face death, we will face it with him." It was all in, ready to follow Jesus to the very end, even if that end was a violent death. This is the real Thomas Brave, loyal and deeply committed. This single verse paints a picture of a man whose love for Jesus overshadowed his fear of death. So, where did the Doubting Thomas label come from? It all stems from the events after Jesus' crucifixion. The disciples are shattered. Their Lord, the man they believed would establish a new kingdom, had been brutally executed. They are hiding behind locked doors, terrified and grieving. Then, on the evening of the resurrection, Jesus appears to them. He shows them his hands and his side. He breathes on them and says, "Receive the Holy Spirit." It's a moment of incredible joy and wonder. But there's one problem. Thomas wasn't there. We don't know why he was absent. Maybe he was out getting supplies. Maybe he was grieving alone. Whatever the reason, he missed this monumental event. When he returns, the other disciples are ecstatic. "We have seen the Lord." They tell him. Now, put yourself in Thomas's shoes. The last thing he saw was Jesus being arrested and taken away to be killed. His world has just been turned upside down. His hope is gone, and now his friends are telling him something that sounds impossible, something that defies all logic and experience. People don't just come back from the dead. So he responds with a statement that would define him for centuries. Unless I see the nail marks in his hands and put my finger where the nails were and put my hand into his side, I will not believe. It sounds like pure doubt, right? But let's look closer. Was this a rejection of Jesus, or a desperate plea for the same experience his friends had? Thomas didn't say, "I'll never believe." He laid out a condition. He wanted what they had. They got to see the physical proof, and he wanted it too. His heart was broken, and he couldn't bear the thought of false hope. He needed to be sure. It wasn't that he didn't want to believe. It was that he wanted to believe so badly that he couldn't afford to be wrong. His demand was for tangible, personal evidence. A week later, the disciples are together again, and this time Thomas is with them. The doors are still locked. Suddenly, Jesus is there among them again. And who does he speak to first? He looks directly at Thomas. He doesn't rebuke him. He doesn't shame him. Instead, he meets him right where he is, with grace and understanding. Jesus says, "Put your finger here. See my hands. Reach out your hand and put it into my side. Stop doubting and believe." Jesus offers Thomas exactly what he asked for. He invites his doubt into the light. And what is Thomas's response? The Bible doesn't actually say he touched Jesus' wounds. Faced with the risen Lord, his need for physical proof melts away. He sees Jesus, he hears him, and he makes one of the most profound declarations of faith in the entire Bible. He exclaims, "My Lord and my God." This is the climax of Thomas's story. He went from needing physical proof to making the highest confession of Jesus' divinity. He didn't just call him teacher or Messiah. He called him my Lord and my God. Jesus then says to him, "Because you have seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed." This wasn't a scolding, but a blessing for all future generations, for us who would have to believe without seeing. Thomas's moment of doubt became a teaching moment for all of humanity. And the story doesn't end there. Thomas's faith, now solidified and unshakable, propelled him to become a passionate missionary. Church history and tradition tell us that Thomas traveled farther than many of the other apostles. He journeyed east, through what is now Syria and Iran, and all the way to India. He is credited with establishing the Christian church in southern India, and to this day, the Marthoma Christians, or St. Thomas Christians, trace their spiritual heritage directly back to his missionary work. Tradition holds that he died a martyr's death in India, pierced by a spear, staying loyal to his Lord to the very end, just as he had declared he would all those years before. So, was Thomas a doubter? Yes, for a moment, but that moment doesn't define him. His story is not a cautionary tale about doubt. It's a story about honest inquiry, fierce loyalty, and a faith that, once confirmed, could move mountains and cross continents. Thomas reminds us that it's okay to have questions. It's okay to need reassurance. A faith that is wrestled with questions is often stronger than one that has never been tested. Thomas wasn't a man of weak faith. He was a man who needed a faith strong enough to die for. And once he found it, he did. He went from being the one who questioned to the one who proclaimed Jesus as my Lord and my God. And that's a legacy worth remembering. Thanks for watching. If you found this story as fascinating as I did, hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into figures and stories from the Bible. Imagine the scene, a dimly lit room in Jerusalem, the air thick with tension and whispered conversations. Jesus is with his closest friends, the disciples, sharing what would be their final meal together. The Passover feast is underway, but there's a heaviness in the room that no one can ignore. Jesus has just washed their feet, a humbling act of a servant, and now he's speaking of betrayal, of leaving them. He says, "I'm going to prepare a place for you, and if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come back and take you to be with me, that you also may be where I am. You know the way to the place where I am going." Can you feel the confusion? The disciples are hanging on his every word, but it's like trying to grasp smoke. Peter, always impulsive, has already tried to get a straight answer. Now, another disciple, known for his directness and maybe even a bit of skepticism. Can't hold back his own confusion, Thesis Thomas. We often remember him as doubting Thomas for what happens later. But here, he's just an honest man trying to understand his teacher, his Lord. He's not being disrespectful. He's being real. He voices what everyone else is probably thinking. He looks at Jesus, his face etched with worry, and says, "Lord, we don't know where you are going, so how can we know the way?" It's a simple, logical question. A practical question. If you don't know the destination, how can you possibly know the route? Thomas isn't questioning Jesus' authority. He's asking for a map. He wants clarity. He represents that part in all of us that craves certainty, that wants a clear, step-by-step guide through the uncertainties of life and faith. He's looking for a physical road, a tangible path to follow. And this is where the conversation pivots from a simple discussion about a journey to one of the most profound statements ever made. Jesus looks at Thomas, and through him, at all the disciples, and at us. His response doesn't give them a map. He doesn't name a road or a city. Instead, he reveals something about his very identity. He says, "I am the way, and the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me." Let's break that down. First, I am the way. Jesus isn't pointing to a path. He's the path. He's not a signpost. He is the road itself. For Thomas, who was thinking in terms of physical directions, this must have been a mind-bending concept. The journey to God isn't about following a set of rules or a geographical route. It's about a relationship with a person. It's about walking with Jesus. He is the living, breathing connection between humanity and God. He bridges the gap that we could never cross on our own. Then, he says, "I am the truth." In a world filled with shifting philosophies, competing ideologies, and half-truths, Jesus declares himself to be the ultimate reality. He is the standard by which everything else is measured. His words, his life, his very being are the embodiment of what is real and true. He's not just a teacher of truth. He is truth's personified. When we seek truth, we are ultimately seeking him. This provides an anchor in the confusing sea of information and opinions we navigate every day. The truth isn't a concept to be learned. It's a person to be known. And finally, I am the life. This goes beyond mere physical existence. The life Jesus speaks of is spiritual, eternal life. It's a quality of life, a fullness of life that begins the moment we connect with him and continues into eternity. He is the source of all that is truly alive. He doesn't just offer a better life. He is life itself. This is the ultimate promise. A life not just of survival, but of deep, meaningful, and eternal purpose, found only in relationship with the Creator through him. Think about the impact of this statement on Thomas and the others. They came to the table that night as followers of a great teacher, a miracle worker, a man they believed to be the Messiah. But in this moment, the scope of who Jesus is expands dramatically. He's not just showing them the way to God. He is the way. He's not just teaching them the truth about God. He is the truth. He's not just promising them life with God. He's the life. The entire framework of their understanding had to shift. The path to God wasn't a secret knowledge or a series of rituals. It was right there, sitting with them, breaking bread. It was a person. This is the heart of the Christian faith. It's not primarily a religion of rules, but a relationship of rescue. Thomas's honest question opened the door for this incredible revelation. His need for clarity allowed Jesus to provide the most profound clarity of all. And it reminds us that it's okay to have questions. It's okay to come to God with our uncertainties and our need for direction. Honest questions, asked with a sincere heart, are not a sign of a lack of faith, but a part of the journey of faith. It's in those moments of seeking that we often receive the most powerful answers. The dialogue between Jesus and Thomas in that upper room wasn't just for them. It echoes through the centuries, speaking directly to our own hearts. When we feel lost and wonder which way to go, Jesus says, "I am the way." When we are confused by the noise of the world and long for something real to hold on to, he says, "I am the truth." And when our souls feel empty and we search for meaning and purpose, he says, "I am the life." It's an invitation not to a religion, but to a relationship with the one who holds the universe together. It's a promise that in him, we find our way home. Thank you so much for watching. If this message resonated with you, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel for more content like this. The air in the Garden of Gethsemane was thick with the scent of olive trees and a heavy sense of foreboding. Jesus, knowing what was to come, knelt to pray, his sweat like drops of blood falling to the ground. His closest disciples, Peter, James, and John, whom he had asked to keep watch, were overcome by sleep, oblivious to the storm about to break. It was a lonely prayer, a moment of profound human anguish as he pleaded with his Father, "If it is possible, let this cup pass from me, yet not as I will, but as you will." Suddenly, the quiet was shattered. Torches flared in the darkness, and the clash of armor echoed through the trees. Judas Iscariot, one of the 12, stepped forward. "Greetings, Rabbi," he said, and kissed Jesus. It was the signal. Roman soldiers and temple guards swarmed in, seizing Jesus. In a flash of panic and misguided loyalty, Peter drew his sword, striking the high priest's servant and cutting off his ear. But Jesus stopped him. "Put your sword back in its place," he commanded, healing the man's ear with a touch. "Do you think I cannot call on my Father, and he will at once put at my disposal more than 12 legions of angels?" But this was the path he had to walk. And so, as his disciples scattered in fear, Jesus was led away, a prisoner. What followed was a chaotic series of sham trials, a legal nightmare played out in the dead of night. First, he was taken to Annas, the former high priest, then to Caiaphas, the current high priest, where the Sanhedrin had gathered. They brought forth false witnesses, their stories conflicting and baseless, yet they were determined to find a charge worthy of death. Caiaphas finally put the question to him directly. "Are you the Christ, the Son of the Blessed One?" Jesus answered, "I am, and you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the Mighty One and coming on the clouds of heaven." This was all they needed. They condemned him for blasphemy, spitting on him, striking him, and mocking him. As stone broke, they handed him over to the Roman governor, Pontius Pilate. The Jewish leaders knew they couldn't execute him themselves, so they needed a Roman sentence. They changed their accusation from blasphemy to treason, claiming Jesus was setting himself up as a king in opposition to Caesar. Pilate was a cynical, world-weary politician. He questioned Jesus. "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus replied, "My kingdom is not of this world." Pilate found no basis for a charge against him. Trying to sidestep the issue, he sent Jesus to Herod Antipas, who was in Jerusalem for the Passover. Herod mocked Jesus, dressed him in an elegant robe, and sent him back. Pilate tried again to release him. It was a custom to release one prisoner during the festival. He offered the crowd a choice: Jesus, or a notorious murderer and insurrectionist named Barabbas. The chief priests stirred up the crowd, and a chilling chant began to rise. "Barabbas, give us Barabbas." Pilate, astonished, asked, "What shall I do?" "Then, with the one you call the King of the Jews." The roar came back, louder this time, a bloodthirsty cry. "Crucify him." Pilate washed his hands before the crowd, a symbolic gesture of disavowing responsibility. "I am innocent of this man's blood," he declared. "It is your responsibility," the crowd screamed. "His blood be on us and on our children." And so, the sentence was passed. The Roman soldiers took Jesus into they stripped him, flogged him with a whip that tore his flesh, and pressed a crown of thorns onto his head. They draped a purple robe over his bleeding shoulders, put a staff in his hand, and knelt before him in cruel mockery. "Hail, King of the Jews!" they jeered, spitting on him and striking him on the head. Then came the final journey. Weakened and bleeding, Jesus was forced to carry his own cross through the crowded streets of Jerusalem toward a place called the Place of the Skull. The weight was too much. He stumbled and fell. The soldiers compelled a man from the crowd, Simon of Cyrene, to carry the cross for him. Women wept along the path, and Jesus, in his agony, turned to them. "Daughters of Jerusalem, do not weep for me. Weep for yourselves and for your children." At Golgotha, they nailed him to the cross. They crucified him between two criminals. Above his head Pilate had placed a sign that read, "Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews." The soldiers gambled for his clothes. The crowd, the rulers, even one of the criminals crucified beside him, hurled insults. He saved others. Let him save himself if he is God's Messiah. Yet from the cross, Jesus spoke words of forgiveness. "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." He entrusted his mother, Mary, to the care of his beloved disciple, John. From noon until 3 in the afternoon, darkness covered the land. A supernatural gloom fell over the world, a reflection of the spiritual darkness of the moment. Then, with a loud cry that ripped through the silence, Jesus called out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" It was the cry of ultimate desolation. The Son, bearing the full weight of sin, he was offered a sponge soaked in wine vinegar. After tasting it, he spoke his final words, "It is finished." And then, "Father, into your hands I commit my spirit." With that, he breathed his last. At that moment, the earth shook. The curtain of the temple, the massive veil that separated the Holy of Holies from the rest of the temple, was torn in two from top to bottom. Tombs broke open. The Roman centurion in charge, witnessing all that had happened, was filled with awe and declared, "Surely this man was the Son of God." For the disciples, this was the end of everything. Their world had shattered. The man they had left everything to follow, the one they believed was the Messiah who would redeem Israel, was dead. He had been publicly executed in the most shameful way imaginable. Their hopes, their dreams, their faith, it all lay broken at the foot of that cross. They were scattered, hiding in fear, consumed by grief and confusion. Thomas, perhaps more than any of the others, was plunged into a chasm of despair. He was a pragmatist, a man who needed to see and touch to believe. He had always been the questioning one. Now, his worst fears had been realized. The miracle worker was gone. The teacher was silenced. All the promises seemed to have died with him on that hill. For Thomas, the darkness that covered the land at noon was now the permanent state of his soul. There was no light, no hope, just the crushing reality of a brutal execution and a future that was now a terrifying, empty void. The story, as far as he could see, was over, and it had ended in the most tragic way possible. Thanks for watching. Today, we'll be diving into one of the most relatable and human stories from the time after Jesus' resurrection. The story of Thomas, often called Doubting Thomas. It's a tale about faith, doubt, and the profound need for personal experience. So, grab a coffee, get comfortable, and let's explore this incredible account together. The story begins in Jerusalem, just days after the crucifixion. The disciples are gathered in a locked room, completely terrified. They've just witnessed their leader, their hope, be brutally executed. They're afraid the same fate awaits them. Suddenly, in the midst of their fear and grief, Jesus appears among them. He doesn't knock. He doesn't use the door. He's just there. He says, "Peace be with you." Can you imagine the shock, the confusion, the sheer disbelief? He shows them the wounds in his hands and his side, and their fear turns into overwhelming joy. He's alive, but one of them was missing. Thomas, also known as Didymus, which means the twin, wasn't there for this miraculous appearance. When the other disciples find him later, they're ecstatic. I tell him, "We have seen the Lord." Now, put yourself in Thomas's shoes. He's a practical guy, a realist. Maybe he's even a bit of a pessimist, hardened by the brutal reality of what he just saw happen to Jesus. Hearing their story, it just sounds too good to be true. It sounds like wishful thinking, a story born from collective grief. So, he makes a bold declaration. He says, "Unless I see the nail marks in his hands and put my finger where the nails were, and put my hand into his side, I will not believe." This is where he gets his famous nickname, Doubting Thomas. But is it really doubt? Or is it a desperate plea for the same experience his friends had? He doesn't just want to hear about it secondhand. He wants to know for himself. He wants that personal, undeniable proof. His statement isn't just skepticism. It's a cry of a heart that wants to believe, but is afraid to be heard again. A full week goes by. Think about that week for Thomas. The other disciples are filled with a renewed sense of hope and joy. They've seen the risen Lord. But Thomas is isolated in his uncertainty. He's surrounded by their joy, but he can't share it. He's the odd one out, wrestling with his thoughts, his logic, and his deep desire for faith. He's stuck between the cold, hard facts of the crucifixion and the unbelievable claims of his closest friends. It must have been an agonizing 7 days. Then, 8 days after the first appearance, the disciples are gathered again. And this time Thomas is with them. The doors are locked, just like before. And once again, Jesus appears in their midst. He greets them with the same words. "Peace be with you," Baptist time. He looks directly at Thomas. He doesn't scold him. He doesn't judge him for his doubt. Instead, he offers him exactly what he asked for. Jesus says, "Put your finger here. See my hands. Reach out your hand and put it into my side. Stop doubting and believe." This is such a powerful moment of grace. Jesus meets Thomas right where he is, in the middle of his doubt. He doesn't demand blind faith. He provides the evidence Thomas felt he needed. And what is Thomas's response? The Bible doesn't actually say if he touched the wounds. The sheer presence of the risen Christ, offering himself so freely, is enough. Overwhelmed, Thomas makes one of the most profound declarations of faith in the entire Bible. He looks at Jesus and says, "My Lord and my God." In that moment, Thomas moves from the ultimate doubter to the ultimate believer. He doesn't just acknowledge that Jesus is alive. He proclaims his divinity. It's a complete and total surrender. Jesus then says something that speaks directly to all of us, for all of time. "Because you have seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed." He's not rebuking Thomas. He is extending a blessing to future generations, to you and to me who would come to faith without the ability to physically see and touch him. The story of Thomas is so important because it validates our own struggles. It's okay to have questions. It's okay to have moments of doubt. Faith isn't about having all the answers or never feeling uncertain. It's about the journey of seeking. Thomas's story shows us that Jesus isn't afraid of our questions. He invites them. He meets us in our skepticism and offers us a path to a deeper, more personal faith. Thomas wanted a real, tangible encounter, and that's exactly what he got. His journey reminds us that an honest doubt can lead to a more robust and unshakable faith than a faith that has never been tested. So, the next time you hear someone called a doubting Thomas, maybe think of it a little differently. Don't see it as a label of weakness, but as a symbol of an honest seeker, someone who won't settle for easy answers but desires a real, personal connection with the truth. Thomas's story is a beautiful reminder that our journey of faith is personal, and it's a journey where our questions are not just allowed, but are often the very things that lead us to a more profound understanding. Thank you so much for joining me today to explore this amazing story. Have you ever felt like you're the only one with doubts? Like everyone else seems to have it all figured out, but you're stuck with questions? If so, you're in good company. Today, we're going to talk about a man who became famous for his doubt, a man named Thomas, and his story might just change how you see your own questions. Imagine the scene. It's just a week after the most world-shaking event in history. Jesus, who had been brutally crucified, was rumored to be alive. The disciples were huddled together in a locked room, a mix of fear, confusion, and a fragile, budding hope. Mary Magdalene had seen him. Peter and John had found the empty tomb. 2 others had walked with him on the road to Emmaus. The reports were coming in, but they were almost too incredible to believe. Then, in a moment that defied all logic, Jesus himself appeared right there in the middle of them. He didn't knock. The door didn't open. He was just there. His first words were a balm to their terrified souls. "Peace be unto you." He showed them his hands and his side, the very marks of his suffering, now transformed into symbols of victory. The disciples were overjoyed. Their despair turned to pure, unadulterated joy. But one person was missing. Thomas. For some reason, he wasn't there for that first incredible appearance. When the others found him, they couldn't contain their excitement. "We have seen the Lord," they exclaimed. Their faces must have been radiant, their voices filled with a conviction that was impossible to fake. How do you think Thomas reacted? Did he jump for joy? Did he celebrate with him? No. His response was grounded in a stark, painful reality. He had seen Jesus die. He had witnessed the brutal finality of the cross. So he says, "Unless I see the nail marks in his hands, and put my finger where the nails were, and put my hand into his side, I will not believe." Now, it's easy to label him Doubting Thomas and move on. We might even judge him a little. After all, his friends, people he trusted, were telling him this amazing news. Why couldn't he just believe them? But let's pause and give Thomas some grace. His doubt wasn't born from stubbornness or a desire to be difficult. It came from a place of deep grief and shattered hope. He had poured his life into following Jesus. He had believed Jesus was the Messiah, the one who would save Israel. And then he watched him die. His world had been turned upside down. Maybe he was just trying to protect his heart from being broken all over again. He needed more than a second-hand story. He needed a first-hand encounter. He wasn't demanding proof to be defiant. He was longing for certainty to heal his broken heart. So, a week goes by. 8 long days. Can you imagine the tension? The other disciples are buzzing with this new reality, while Thomas is living in a gray area, caught between their testimony and his own painful experience. They gather again, and 'tis time Thomas is with them. The doors are locked, just like before. They're probably still afraid. And then it happens again. Then came Jesus, and stood in the midst, and said, "Peace be unto you." The same words. The same supernatural arrival. But this time Jesus' attention is focused on one man. He turns to Thomas. He doesn't scold him. He doesn't shame him for his doubt. Instead, he meets him right where he is. He offers Thomas exactly what he said he needed. Jesus says, "Reach hither thy finger, and behold my hands, and reach hither thy hand, and thrust it into my side, and be not faithless, but believing." Jesus essentially repeats Thomas's own words back to him, but with infinite gentleness and understanding. It's a powerful invitation. It's as if Jesus is saying, "I know your heart, Thomas. I know your pain. I'm not afraid of your questions. Come, see for yourself." The Bible doesn't actually say whether Thomas touched the wounds. Maybe the sight of the risen, living Christ standing before him was enough. Seeing the very wounds he had demanded to touch, offered to him with such love and grace, shattered his skepticism. In that moment, all his conditions, all his requirements, they just melted away. What follows is one of the most profound and powerful declarations in all of Scripture. Thomas doesn't just say, "Oh, it's you. I believe you're alive." He goes so much further. He looks at Jesus, the man he had walked with, eaten with, and listened to, and he confesses, "My Lord and my God." This is a monumental statement. He's the first disciple to explicitly call Jesus God. His doubt, his need for tangible proof, led him to a deeper, more profound revelation of who Jesus truly is than any of the others had yet expressed. His journey through the valley of doubt brought him to the mountaintop of worship. He didn't just believe that Jesus was risen. He understood that the risen Jesus was divine. So, what does this mean for us? This story is a beautiful reminder that God is not afraid of our questions. He's not offended by our doubts. In fact, an honest doubt is often more sincere than a blind, unthinking faith. Like Thomas, we can bring our questions, our uncertainties, and even our demands to God. He can handle it. He invites us to investigate, to seek, to ask the hard questions. But the story also comes with a gentle challenge. After Thomas's confession, Jesus says something for all of us who would come later. "Thomas, because thou hast seen me, thou hast believed. Blessed are they that have not seen, and yet have believed." This isn't a rebuke. It's a blessing. It's for you, and it's for me. We live thousands of years later. We can't physically see the nail-scarred hands, but we have the testimony of Thomas and countless others throughout history. We have the scriptures. We have the changed lives of believers all around us. The journey of Thomas shows us that faith is not the absence of doubt, but the courage to press through it. If you're in a season of questioning, don't be discouraged. Do what Thomas did. Stay with the community of believers. Even when you have questions, bring your doubts honestly before God. And be open to the possibility that, just like he did for Thomas, he will meet you in a way that is personal and profound, turning your doubt into your deepest declaration of faith. Thanks so much for watching. If this story resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. The resurrection of Jesus Christ stands as the single most pivotal event in human history, a blinding flash of hope in a world consumed by darkness. Yet, in the immediate aftermath of this triumph, one of Jesus' closest followers was lost in a shadow of his own making. This is the story of Thomas, a man whose profound skepticism would lead to one of the most powerful declarations of faith ever recorded. Imagine the scene. Just days before, the disciples had watched in horror as their Lord, their teacher, their friend, was brutally crucified and laid in a cold, stone tomb. Their hopes were crucified with him. Grief and fear were their constant companions. But then, on the third day, a whisper of hope pierced the gloom. Mary Magdalene ran to them, breathless, her eyes wide with wonder. "I have seen the Lord." The tomb, she said, was empty. Later, the disciples huddled together in a locked room, their whispers a mix of terror and fragile excitement. Could it be true? Suddenly, without a door opening, Jesus was there, standing among them. His first words were a balm to their terrified souls. "Peace be with you." He then showed them his hands, his side, the very wounds that had confirmed his death. A tidal wave of joy washed over them, a joy so pure it banished every trace of despair. The Lord was truly risen, but one of them was missing. Thomas, also known as Didymus, the twin, was not with them when Jesus appeared. When the other disciples found him, their faces radiant, and told him the incredible news, "We have seen the Lord," Thomas couldn't accept it. His heart, still shattered by the trauma of the cross, couldn't make the leap. His mind, grounded in the grim reality he had witnessed, demanded tangible proof. "Unless I see the nail marks in his hands," he declared, his voice firm with a sorrowful certainty, "and put my finger where the nails were, and put my hand into his side, I will not believe." An entire week went by. For the others, it was a week of dawning realization and joy. For Thomas, it was a week of torment, caught between the joyous testimony of his friends and the stubborn refusal of his own mind. He was alone with his doubt. Then, the disciples gathered again, behind the same locked doors. Untasting Thomas was with them. As before, Jesus materialized in their midst. Again, he offered his greeting of comfort. "Peace be with you." Then, his eyes found Thomas. With a voice not of condemnation, but of infinite compassion and understanding, Jesus spoke directly to his struggling disciple. "Put your finger here. See my hands. Reach out your hand and put it into my side." It was a direct invitation. Jesus was offering the very proof Thomas had demanded, inviting him to touch the wounds that fueled his disbelief. "Stop doubting," Jesus urged him gently, "and believe." In that singular moment, Thomas's world shattered and was remade. The walls of logic and skepticism he had built around his heart crumbled into dust. Before him was not a ghost, not a collective delusion, but his risen Lord, alive and real, still bearing the glorious scars of his sacrifice. Overwhelmed with awe, shame, and a profound love, Thomas fell to his knees. The words that burst from his soul would echo through eternity. "My Lord and my God." Jesus looked upon him, his gaze filled with a love that saw beyond Thomas's momentary weakness. "Because you have seen me, you have believed," he said. And then, he spoke a blessing that would extend across time and space. A blessing for all of us who would follow, for all who walk by faith and not by sight. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed. This powerful story isn't just about Thomas. It's about us. It's a profound reminder that it's okay to have questions. It's human to seek understanding and even to wrestle with doubt. Jesus wasn't angry with Thomas. He met him right where he was, in his place of uncertainty. Thomas's journey shows us that honest doubt, when brought into the presence of Christ, can lead to the deepest and most unshakable faith. His story teaches us that faith isn't the absence of questions, but the trust we place in the one who has all the answers. the one who conquered death itself. And it is in that belief, the trust in the unseen, that we find true, abundant, and everlasting life.
To uncover the incredible life of an apostle whose faith, once tested, became a powerful force that reached the ends of the earth. His story didn't end with him touching the wounds of Jesus. It was just the beginning. So, let's go back to that room, 8 days after the resurrection. The disciples are gathered, filled with a mix of awe and fear. Thomas, having missed Jesus' first appearance, is skeptical. His demand is famous. "Unless I see the nail marks in his hands, and put my finger where the nails were, and put my hand into his side, I will not believe." It's a raw, honest expression of doubt. But this isn't a story about a lack of faith. It's about the need for a personal encounter. And then, Jesus appears again. He doesn't rebuke Thomas. Instead, he invites him in. "Put your finger here. See my hands. Reach out your hand and put it into my side. Stop doubting and believe." In that moment, everything changes for Thomas. He doesn't just see proof. He encounters the living, resurrected Lord. His response is one of the most profound declarations of faith in the entire Bible. "My Lord and my God." This wasn't just an acknowledgement. It was total surrender, a complete shift from doubt to devotion. From this point on, Thomas is a changed man. He is no longer the skeptic in the corner, but a core member of the unified group of apostles. For the next 40 days, he walks with them, learning directly from the resurrected Jesus. Imagine the conversations, the depth of understanding he must have gained about the kingdom of God. He was being prepared, along with the others, for a mission that would change the world. Then comes the day of the ascension. Thomas stands on the Mount of Olives, his eyes fixed on Jesus as he is taken up into heaven. He hears the promise of the Holy Spirit and the Great Commission to be witnesses to the ends of the earth. For Thomas, who once needed to see to believe, this was a pivotal moment. He was now a witness to the ultimate departure, tasked with carrying the message without Jesus' physical presence. The doubt was gone, replaced by a firm, unwavering purpose. He returns to Jerusalem with the other disciples, not in fear, but in anticipation. They gather in the upper room, praying and waiting, united in a single cause. And then, at Pentecost, the promise is fulfilled. The sound of a rushing wind, tongues of fire, and the outpouring of the Holy Spirit. Thomas, along with everyone else, is filled with supernatural power. The man who once privately questioned is now boldly and publicly proclaiming the good news in new languages. The transformation is complete. The doubter has become a dynamic, spirit-filled apostle. The book of Acts tells us about the early church's explosive growth in Jerusalem and Judea, but the apostles' mission was global. And this is where Thomas's story takes a fascinating and inspiring turn, leading him far beyond the world he knew. Ancient traditions, particularly from the early church fathers and the Christian communities in India, paint a vivid picture of his missionary journeys. His path, according to these traditions, led him eastward. He is believed to have traveled through Persia, modern-day Iran, preaching the gospel and establishing churches along the way. His journey was fraught with challenges, unfamiliar cultures, different languages, and resistance to his message. Yet fueled by his profound faith and the power of the Holy Spirit, he pressed on. He was no longer a man who needed physical proof. His conviction was now an internal fire. The most enduring tradition, and one deeply cherished by millions, is that of Thomas's arrival in India. Around the year 52 AD, he is said to have landed on the Malabar coast in what is now the state of Kerala. This wasn't just a brief visit. Thomas immersed himself in the local culture, learning the language and customs to share the message of Jesus in a way people could understand. He didn't come as a conqueror, but as a servant. He established 7.5 churches, and his ministry was reportedly marked by miracles and a deep, personal connection with the people he met. He engaged with local communities, from Brahmins to fishermen, and his teachings took root. laying the foundation for one of the oldest Christian communities in the world, the St. Thomas Christians, or Nazranis. Their traditions, liturgy, and history are deeply intertwined with the apostle who brought the faith to their shores. But his work was not without opposition. After years of ministry on the West Coast, tradition says he traveled to the eastern coast of India, near modern-day Chennai. There, his growing influence drew the ire of local leaders who felt threatened by his message. Around the year 72 AD, the Apostle Thomas's journey on earth came to a martyr's end. He was killed for his faith, sealing his testimony with his own life. The doubter had become a martyr, giving everything for the Lord he had once questioned. The story of Thomas is so much more than a single moment of doubt. It's a powerful testament to transformation. It shows us that it's okay to have questions, that honest doubt can lead to a deeper, more resilient faith. Thomas's journey from a skeptical follower to a pioneering missionary who carried the gospel to the far corners of the known world is one of the most remarkable stories of the early church. His legacy isn't doubt. It's the unwavering faith that was forged in a personal encounter with the risen Christ, a faith that inspired him to cross continents and ultimately give his life for his Lord and his God.
Have you ever struggled with doubt? That nagging feeling in the back of your mind that whispers, is this really true? It's a feeling we all know, a very human experience. And if you've ever felt that way about your faith, you're in good company. In fact, one of the most famous stories about doubt comes from one of Jesus' closest followers. This is the story of Thomas, a man whose doubt led to one of the most powerful declarations of faith ever recorded. Imagine the scene. Jerusalem. The air is thick with a strange mix of fear and whispered excitement. Jesus, the man they had followed, the man they believed was the Messiah, had been brutally crucified. His disciples, shattered and terrified, were huddled together behind locked doors, afraid they might be next. Their hopes, their dreams, everything they had staked their lives on, seemed to be dead and buried with their master. Then, the impossible happened. Jesus appeared, not as a ghost, not as a memory, but alive, standing right there among them. Their grief and fear melted away, replaced by an unbelievable, overwhelming joy. He was alive. It was all true. But one of them wasn't there. Thomas, also called Didymus, the twin, had missed Italiano. When the others found him, they couldn't contain their excitement. "We have seen the Lord," they exclaimed, their faces radiant with this incredible news. You can almost hear the urgency in their voices, the desperate need for him to share in their joy. But Thomas couldn't make the leap. Perhaps he was the pragmatist of the group, the one who always needed to see things for himself. Maybe the grief was still too raw, the disappointment too deep. His response was blunt, almost defiant. "Unless I see the nail marks in his hands and put my finger where the nails were, and put my hand into my side, I will not believe." It's easy to be hard on Thomas, to label him Doubting Thomas, and move on. But let's pause and stand in his shoes for a moment. He had seen his friend and teacher arrested, beaten, and executed in the most horrific way. His world had been turned upside down. Was it so unreasonable to want concrete, physical proof? He wasn't just asking for a sign. He was asking for the one thing that could heal the wound in his own heart, to see for himself that the horror he witnessed had been overcome. His doubt wasn't born from a place of arrogance, but from a place of deep pain and shattered hope. A whole week went by. Can you imagine how long that week must have felt for Thomas? The other disciples were living in the light of the resurrection, their joy rekindled. But Thomas was stuck in the dark, wrestling with his skepticism, perhaps feeling isolated from the very people who were his family. He was with them, but he wasn't really with them. He was trapped in the lonely prison of his own doubt. Then, a week later, the disciples were together again, back in that same room, doors locked. And peacetime Thomas was with them. Suddenly, just as before, Jesus was there, standing in their midst. He greeted them with his customary words of comfort. "Peace be with you." And then, he turned his attention directly to Thomas. Jesus didn't scold him. He didn't shame him for his lack of faith. Instead, he met Thomas exactly where he was, in the heart of his doubt. With infinite compassion and understanding, He looked at him and said, "Put your finger here. See my hands. Reach out your hand and put it into my side. Stop doubting and believe." Jesus offered Thomas the very proof he had demanded. He invited him into the reality of his resurrection, not with a lecture, but with an open-armed invitation to touch the evidence. He showed Thomas that his doubts weren't a barrier to a relationship with him, but an opportunity for a deeper encounter. In that moment, everything changed for Thomas. We don't know if he actually touched the wounds. The Bible doesn't say, but what it does tell us is that seeing his Lord, hearing his name spoken with such love and understanding, was enough. All his resistance, all his skepticism, crumbled. The walls he had built around his heart came crashing down. Overwhelmed, humbled, and filled with a faith that was now forged in the fire of his own questioning, Thomas made a profound declaration. It was more than just recognizing his friend. It was a cry of worship, a statement of ultimate truth that went beyond what any other disciple had yet said. He looked at Jesus and proclaimed, "My Lord and my God." In that instant, Thomas's doubt was transformed into a powerful, personal, and unshakable faith. He didn't just believe because the others told him to. He believed because he had encountered the risen Christ for himself. His doubt forced him to seek a more personal, more tangible connection. And in the end, it led him to a deeper revelation of who Jesus truly is. Jesus then offers a final, gentle teaching, not just for Thomas, but for all of us who would come after. "Because you have seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed." This isn't a rebuke. It's a blessing. It's an encouragement for every generation to come, for you and for me, who walk by faith and not by sight. It's a promise that a genuine faith, even one that hasn't had the chance to physically see, is precious and blessed in God's eyes. The story of Thomas is so powerful because it validates our own struggles. It tells us that it's okay to have questions. It's okay to wrestle with uncertainty. Doubt isn't the opposite of faith. It can be a part of the journey toward a more robust and authentic faith. Like Thomas, we can bring our honest questions and our deepest pains to God. The story assures us that he won't turn us away. He will meet us right where we are. Thomas's journey teaches us that a faith that has been tested is often the strongest. He wanted more than second-hand information. He wanted a first-hand experience, and that's what he received. His story invites us not to settle for a borrowed faith, but to seek our own personal encounter with the divine. It encourages us to confront our doubts head-on, not by suppressing them, but by bringing them into the light, where they can be met with grace, understanding, and transformative truth. So the next time you feel the shadow of doubt creeping in, remember Thomas. Remember his honesty, his courage to voice his uncertainty, and the beautiful, compassionate response he received. His story is a timeless reminder that our questions don't disqualify us. They can, in fact, be the very path that leads us to fall on our knees and declare with a newfound conviction, "My Lord and my God." Thank you so much for watching. If this story resonated with you, please consider liking the video and subscribing to our channel for more content that explores faith. Go to now, ye rich men, weep and howl for your miseries that shall come upon you. Your riches are corrupted, and your garments are moth-eaten. Your gold and silver is cankered, and the rust of them shall be a witness against you, and shall eat your flesh as it were fire. Ye have heaped treasure together for the last days. Behold, the hire of the laborers who have reaped down your fields, which is of ye kept back by fraud, crieth. And the cries of them which have reaped are entered into the ears of the Lord of Sabaoth. Ye have lived in pleasure on the earth, and been wanton. They have nourished your hearts, as in a day of slaughter. Ye have condemned and killed the just, and he doth not resist you. Be patient, therefore, brethren, unto the coming of the Lord. Behold, the husbandman waiteth for the precious fruit of the earth, and hath long patience for it, until he receive the early and latter rain. Be thee also patient. Stablish your hearts, for the coming of the Lord draweth nigh. Grudge not one against another, brethren, lest ye be condemned. Behold, the judge standeth before the door. Take, my brethren, the prophets, who have spoken in the name of the Lord, for an example of suffering, affliction, and of patience. Behold, we count them happy which endure. Ye have heard of the patience of Job, and have seen the end of the Lord, that the Lord is very pitiful, and of tender mercy. But above all things, my brethren, swear not, neither by heaven, neither by the earth, neither by any other oath, but let your yea be yea, and your nay, lest the fall into condemnation. Is any among you afflicted? Let him pray. Is any merry? Let him sing psalms. Is any sick among you? Let him call for the elders of the church, and let them pray over him, anointing him with oil in the name of the Lord. And the prayer of faith shall save the sick, and the Lord shall raise him up. And if he have committed sins, they shall be forgiven him. Confess your faults one to another, and pray one for another, that they may be healed. The effectual fervent prayer of a righteous man availeth much. Elias was a man subject to like passions, as we are, and he prayed earnestly that it might not rain. And it rained not on the earth, by the space of 3 years and 6 months. And he prayed again, and the heaven gave rain, and the earth brought forth her fruit. Brethren, if any of you are from the truth, and one convert him, let him know that he which converteth the sinner from the error of his way shall save a soul from death, and shall hide a multitude of sins.